Welcome, everyone, to the Information's TITV. My name is Akash Pasricha. It is Wednesday, August 6th. It is the busiest earnings day of the week. Uber, Shopify, and Disney all reported earnings this morning. We have also got Airbnb, DoorDash, and Lyft after the bell. Speaking of Uber, don't go anywhere because we have got the CEO of Uber, Dara Khosrowshahi, coming on the stream in just a few minutes. We're going to ask him about the quarter and about what he's got cooking for the company. We have also got Snap earnings that we're going to get into with our friends over at Creator Ventures. We're going to talk with Adrian Aoun about OpenAI's new open weight model. And finally, we're going to hear from our financial analysis columnist, Anita Ramaswamy, about her thoughts on AI coding startup valuations. But let's start with the headlines out of Disney and Shopify this morning. Disney reported earnings, and the big news was that the company is launching a new streaming app for ESPN on August 21st, and ESPN is also acquiring the NFL Network in exchange for a 10% stake that the NFL will take in ESPN. The other big news with Disney is that the company said it is expanding Hulu into international markets, and the full integration of Hulu into Disney Plus is expected to be done by next year. On to Shopify, the company's shares were surging Wednesday morning as revenue grew 31%. That was much faster than it did last quarter. And the most important thing here is that the company said tariffs did not impact the business as much as they would have originally thought. Okay, let's talk about Snap. Snap reported earnings last night, and it was quite the contrast with other social media platforms that have reported. Total revenue was up 9%, but ad revenue was up only 4%. Just for context, Meta's ad business grew 21% over the period. Joining me now, I want to bring on Sasha Kaletsky, managing partner at Creator Ventures, to talk about the results. Sasha, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you very much, Akash.
So what stood out to you about Snap's earnings last night?
Well, so the first thing to say about Snap's earnings is it's always a roller coaster, whatever happens. If you look at the last 10 quarters of Snap reporting earnings, I think there's only been one where it's moved up or down less than 10%. So a 15% move after market, 19% this morning is pretty much par for the course for Evan Spiegel and the team. But in this case, it was a disappointing quarter from the market's perspective. Like you said, revenue met expectations, ad revenue a bit disappointing. Earnings per share just about missed. But I think what the market was really responding to was, although global DAUs was up 9%, not all DAUs are created equal. And US DAUs were actually down 2% year on year, which I think a lot of analysts consider the kind of leading indicator for long-term revenue growth.
So
and finally, go ahead.
Oh, no, let's dig into the DAUs because that's what jumped out at me too. North America users declining. Why?
Well, so, the kind of stereotype of Snap is that it's kind of for kids. And you have this long-term issue they've been trying to get over of new users and cohorts of users joining when they kind of join high school and college and then gradually churning out over time. But, that's been Snap's long-term issue. They are trying to retain those older cohorts, but they have been struggling of late.
And, you must use all these platforms. I'm curious about what you make about the direction that Snap's platform has been going, Snapchat. I don't use it as much. So what have been your thoughts about the platform itself?
Well, actually, I think although these results are not great, there is still a lot to be excited about in the Snapchat platform. They've invested incredibly aggressively in Spotlight through their creator program, which is now spending 40% of usage watching content is now in Spotlight, which is basically a TikTok-like product they launched in 2020. Snapchat Plus, which is effectively a paid subscription, a way of getting more features out of Snapchat, the most relevant of which is to kind of see who likes you and all those kinds of social features are also surging. So there's actually a lot to like about what they've been doing on the product. It's just the business model and the usage is not quite catching up yet.
So if you're bullish on the platform, then what's the solution here, do you think?
Yeah, I think they're doing a lot of the things they need to do. Like I said, their Spotlight product it is really doing well and it is working. I think probably the biggest upside case for Snap is unfortunately really out of the hands of the team, and it's always been TikTok seeing an issue with the US regulators and those trade talks not going through. Obviously, if TikTok were banned in the US, this would be incredible for Snap and Snapchat. which is not necessarily something they can control, but it's definitely an upside.
One of the most interesting parts of the call last night, I thought, was the technical glitch that they talked about affected revenue. Can you share any of your thoughts on what happened?
Yeah, so these ad platforms work is it's effectively based on bidding, as you know, as Google kind of pioneered a long time ago. And if there's a slight error with the algorithms, the way the bidding works, you can find some companies get extremely discounted ad placements. Effectively, the market's not working correctly, and that's what happened in the last quarter. The CFO said that actually he implied it had a multi-percentage point impact on their year-on-year growth, which is staggeringly huge, if that's true.
Right. And, the company's outlook, I mean, sometimes the company doesn't actually issue any outlook. This time, they did give us revenue guidance. What did you make of the forecast that they had for next quarter?
Yeah, they said that they were actually tracking towards it already. They're obviously getting back to growth. And they implied that they were actually, the way Q3 was tracking so far, they were already on track to hit it. Maybe they needed a little bit of a boost to get there. But yeah, they seem relatively confident on making it. You know, if you're Snapchat and your earnings are always a bit of a kind of can go one of two ways. I think you're only probably going to give earnings or guidance that you're kind of likely to hit. So I do feel somewhat confident that they're more likely to hit it than previously.
Great. Well, Sasha, thank you so much for coming on the show. Every time Snap reports, it is always a roller coaster, as you said. So it is great to have someone help us make sense of it. That is Sasha Kaletsky from Creator Ventures. This morning, Uber reported strong earnings thanks to growth in ride hailing and delivery. Revenue grew 18%, and the company announced a new $20 billion share repurchase program. We are very excited to have Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi here to discuss those results and the future of the company, including their bet into autonomous vehicles. He'll be talking with our editor-in-chief, Jessica Lessin. Jessica, over to you.
Thank you, Akash. Dara, thanks for joining us on TITV. It's great to see you.
Happy to be here.
So strong results today, nearly 20% growth. And as you've shared, you're really seeing that combination of ride hailing and delivery build a flywheel for the business. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. We're super excited. I mean, ride hailing is what Uber has been known for, and the ride hailing business grew really nicely. Transactions were up 19%, gross bookings were up 18%, profitability was up 22%. But then what's special about Uber is that we are both in ride hailing and in delivery, and we're able to bring consumers onto one side of the business and then promote the other side of the business, which really is an advantage that we have over the other players. So about 30% of, for example, Uber Eats's new customers come from our rides business. We've got the Uber One membership program that allows you to save money on riding or on delivery as well. So what you saw with our delivery business is actually gross bookings growth accelerated. You know, we're doing over $20 billion in gross bookings. So usually you don't see businesses of this size accelerate, but the gross bookings actually on our delivery business accelerated, really great profitability. So right now we're very happy about this combination of both working together.
So you also gave an update on autonomous. And I think this is one of the most interesting parts of your business because you're striking a number of partnerships with companies like Waymo, but so many more. Why the eggs in multiple basket approach? Does it have to do with your questioning of whether any one product will take the market? Give us the update on autonomous as you see it today.
Yeah, definitely, Jessica. So I think the one thing that's a little bit counterinstinctive about Uber, and I was actually surprised when I joined, is that we're actually a supply-led business, which is the more drivers we have on the platform, the lower surge we get on the platform, the better reliability. You know, our average ETA across the world is now 4 minutes. And as prices come down and reliability continues to improve, more people come onto the platform because it's a really easy way of getting around. So just like we are looking to add more human drivers onto the platform, we want to add more robot drivers onto the platform. And really what we want to do is be a catalyst for the entire autonomous ecosystem, so to speak, by sometimes partnering with, sometimes investing in a number of partners We obviously have the Waymo partnership. We expanded in Austin. We entered into Atlanta, and that's doing really well. But we also have terrific partnerships with WeRide in Abu Dhabi. Again, a nice expansion there with Wave in the UK, AvRide, May Mobility, Baidu, Neuro and Lucid Together, many others, because as we get more autonomous robot drivers onto our platform becomes more reliable, and as a result, we succeed. So we want the entire autonomous ecosystem to succeed, and I think partnered with Uber, we can drive a lot of growth there.
Do you have any forecasts of sort of where a tipping point might be and when the robot drivers outnumber the drivers, or just how do you think about where you are? I mean, forecasts in this space are notoriously off by decades, but now you're in it. You have partnerships up and running. What's your outlook?
All right, so you just told me how all forecasts are wrong, and you want me to make a forecast?
Absolutely. So I can
Yeah,
get you back
exactly.
on.
So I think actually the most challenging part that we're finding in autonomous isn't on the software. And a lot of kind of these larger models and the advent that you see in large language models has an echo in autonomous. And we're seeing the newer software players really accelerate in terms of their time to market. The biggest issue is actually the hardware side and the OEMs. How quickly can you get cars that are affordable? And I would say less than $100,000, for example. Right now, these autonomous cars are really expensive. They've got sensor suites, multiple cameras, LiDAR. They've got, big compute in the back, often with NVIDIA chips. These are really expensive pieces of hardware. And in order to make autonomous commercialize at scale, you need to bring the cost of that hardware down, which is, for example, one of the reasons why we partnered with Lucid. It's going to take, I would say, 2 more generations of vehicles to get to the prices of well under $100,000, at least available in the US. China may be different, or the rest of the world may be different. For example, Apollo, who is part of Baidu, is already producing cars for less than 50,000. But in the US, it'll take 2 generations of cars to get there. That's probably 5 to 6 years to really get started with these lower cost cars, and probably another 5 to 7 years to really scale to be close to the numbers of human drivers out there. So there you go. Another prediction that'll be wrong.
2033, if I did my math. But
something.
and how do you think about the competition from some of these partners? I live in the Bay Area, so I've got my Uber app, I have my Lyft app, and I've got my Waymo app. I mean, how do you consider that in entering into these partnerships, and that these partners are also looking at building their own networks?
It's a way of life. Competition is a way of life for Uber. We've always competed with other networks, but I think that if you look at our Uber Eats business, I think you're going to see a roadmap to the future. In that, Starbucks has their own app, and they attract consumers to that app, and they want to sell direct. But at the same time, in order to drive the utilization in their stores, they also work with Uber Eats. They work with DoorDash as well. I wish they didn't, but they do work with DoorDash as well. So essentially, I think you're going to see the same thing with autonomous. These are very, very expensive cars. You want to get as many rides as possible to as many riders as possible into these cars. And that will be possible with Uber as a partner. But it doesn't mean that some of these players, like a Waymo or like a Zoox, aren't also going to build a direct channel. So there's kind of the drama, which is, hey, either you compete or you work together. The fact is that in our ecosystem already in food, we compete and work together. And I think that'll be the same. The same will be true in autonomous.
Got it. I want to ask you about M&A. Obviously, we've been in a period for a couple of years where everyone's put the brakes on big deals. You're in a position of strength. What about going out and gobbling up an Instacart? How do you look at the opportunities?
Well, we just announced a really big acquisition, and that's a buyback of $20 billion of a really cool company.
No regulatory approval required.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't have to pay a premium. So it's pretty cool. So I think what you're going to see is our biggest capital spend is going to be with a buyback, because we think, frankly, it's a really good deal right now. We want to reduce our share count. all the goodness that comes with it. We are going to look at M&A. We bought, for example, Trendyol Go in Turkey because we think that's going to be a huge growth market. We're already in there with mobility. Now we have mobility and delivery together, which is really strategic. But I think, Jessica, the best way to make sure that you do great deals is not to have to do deals at all. Organic growth for us is really great. Sure, we're going to look around, but at this point, I think the organic path is the most likely path that we're going to take.
What about, I mean, you're so strong in many markets, and also some of your competitors are, really taking steps to compete with you. I'd say, especially in Europe, where we've seen more. What's your view on the European landscape right now?
Well, we've been able to grow organically in Europe. We built our UK business. We're now the number one player there. We're number one in France. We launched in Germany about 5 to 6 years ago, and we're seeing really good product market fit there and terrific growth there. We're number two in Spain, but gaining category position. So we've taken the organic path there. And frankly, it's hard to take the organic path. You've got to build in the market. Every single market is different. You've got to train your AI algorithms to work in the streets of Manchester and the streets of Lisbon as well. So it's not a surprise to see some of our competitors buy their way into the European market. The fact that it's high GDP, high average purchase rates, and highly profitable for us. M&A sounds good, but the integration is actually pretty painful. So I actually think for the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to lean into Europe while some of these other players are distracted by all of the stuff that comes with the integration. So I see it as an opportunity. But listen, we take competition seriously. Process, who's bought in, DoorDash, who's bought in. These are big companies. They're worthwhile competitors. And I'm just glad we've been able to build organically.
Mhm. Well, I just, before we let you go, a couple more questions, but I actually want to zoom out. Today's results show you really restored, Uber to really impressive growth, and you've been in the role for a while. I'm kind of wondering what you've learned. I mean, what are some of your big lessons that, going through the pandemic and getting to this point sort of stand out at you?
I think for us, it's about product and it's about speed. A lot of the stuff that we build looks easy, but actually the work that our engineers put in, that product people put in, the algorithms that we build, the tuning of these algorithms, we're constantly reinventing ourselves. Every 2 years we build a product and then we replace it and replace it. In the end, it's about the tech and the product and kind of the data science that we have. That is what wins. Obviously, there's a lot that comes around it, marketing, operations. We have to be responsible financially. But it's really the focus on products and engineering that has got us where we are. It's sometimes underappreciated, but it's by far the most important part of the business.
Move fast. And Dara, I do just want to ask, because there is a story today in the Times that is alleging that Uber hasn't been aggressive enough in combating sexual assault through the platform. Do you have anything you'd like to say about the piece?
I think, first I tell you that sexual assault is a problem, across society, obviously. And with Uber, where we're doing 36 million rides a day, that same issue is going to show up on Uber. The fact is, I think as a company, there's no company that has done more to combat this, to be transparent about our safety record. We have now released a number of safety reports laying out exactly what are the issues that we've had. And I think we've innovated on safety like no one else. You can track your ride now. You can reach 911 in an emergency. If we see the Uber go off route, we're going to try to contact you. We have audio recording now for riders and drivers. We now have video recording available. We're absolutely leading in terms of safety, which has led to, if you look at our safety record in our last safety report, we've improved by 44% versus our first one. That's not enough. As long as there's any sexual violence happening on the Uber platform, we're not going to be satisfied. But every single day, we're working to get better. I think that we're going to keep innovating, and hopefully others can come in behind us. And we're going to be transparent in terms of what we're working on and also what our problems are.
Well, it's a busy day for you, Dara. So we appreciate you being here and giving us the update. And we'll be watching, and especially when it comes to autonomous. I want autonomous everywhere, personally. So
So do I.
thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Back to you, Akash.
That was Jessica Lessin with Dara Khosrowshahi. Okay, before we get to our next guest, I want to bring your attention to a story that we just published late last night about AI video company Runway. The information was first to report that the company is raising around $500 million at a valuation of at least $5 billion before the investment. That is up from the $3 billion valuation that the company fetched last year. And we also learned that Runway is doing about $90 million in annualized revenue. And you might recall that we had Runway CEO Chris Valenzuela on the show just a few weeks ago. One of the things that he talked about was that the company is focusing on the enterprise consumer, and they're also innovating this new offering where they actually put consultants on the ground, or Runway employees on the ground with these enterprises to help teach them how they can use the software. I should say, Runway isn't the only AI video company that is busy fundraising. Luma AI is also raising money. They are raising at least $1.1 billion at a $3.2 billion valuation. That was also in our story. And a bit of juicy intel here. Meta at one point talked to Luma about potentially acquiring the business. I will link that story in our show notes. AI video is clearly very hot. Okay, yesterday, OpenAI released a new open weight model, GPT-OSS. It's the latest move in this ongoing AI war between the new titans of tech. And here for an insider's reaction is Adrian Aoun, a serial entrepreneur who spent a number of years at Google after selling them an early machine learning startup. I want to bring Jessica back to run this interview. Jessica, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Akash. And Adrian, welcome to TITV. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Okay, so it's a hot AI summer, which just means headline after headline after headline. And for some reason, someone got the memo that this week is the model upgrade week. And so we've seen something new from OpenAI and are expecting more later in the week. Same from Anthropic. As Akash said, we've got an open weight model here from OpenAI, maybe taking aim at Llama a little bit. But what did you make of OpenAI's move and kind of doing their, I guess they had an open weight model earlier, but this is really one of their first big moves into the space?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think we all have to say is congratulations. It's a damn good model, right? And so
you already played with it? It's been like 12 hours.
I don't sleep much. So look, take a step back. This shift all happened when Zuck and Meta started a few years ago and said, we should just be open sourcing these models because it's inherently deflationary to all the model providers. Now, Zuck can do this competitively because he can make money off the ads, whereas everybody else at the time was making money off the models. And so he said, I'm going to make OpenAI dance. And the problem is they danced incredibly well. What they did is they shifted their revenue model from we're just monetizing the models to now we've got applications and APIs that are built on top that they're monetizing incredibly well. And so here, if you're Sam, all of a sudden you go, wait a minute, that was actually a really good strategy. I didn't like it when it came out, but now I should make the models just as deflationary as anybody else. So if you're training these models and they cost billions of dollars, but they're a rapidly depreciating asset, then you're moving from a world where anybody can build models because they just got some funding in a research lab to actually the only people who can be in the model game are people who have real revenue streams. So from my perspective, if I'm Sam, this is fantastic. Now,
doesn't this affect the ChatGPT subscription business ultimately too, though? I mean, if you're giving away some models, doesn't it hurt that part of the business, which, for them is the cash cow, or at least
it turns out not. It turns out that users are trained not to download a model and use it, but instead to go to the website the same way users aren't flocking away from google.com right now because we're so ingrained and so trained to it. We've all been trained to chatgpt.com and we're using it at scale. But what you mentioned is interesting because who is this really good for? Well, the reality is this is very good for Apple. Apple doesn't have a whole bunch of on-device models that are best in class at this level, so they can start employing these. Now, who might this not be good for? Well, in some ways, it might not be good for society. It's a little too early to know, but we're putting more and more powerful models in the hands of anyone. Now,
Mhm.
we were doing this with China, right? Launching DeepSeek. And now at least
Yep.
we've restored this. And the standard is now going to be let's build back on the US, which matters both for public perception, but also because the US is worried about bias being built into these models. If everybody's building on DeepSeek out of China, maybe it starts to affect our culture. Or some of us are even more worried that there's hidden attacks in these models. Like, what happens if we're all building on DeepSeek, but DeepSeek is very quietly inserting malware attacks or backdoors into the software that it's writing nefarious code. So I think that generally this is going to be a good move, but it only increases the speed of the race of the big model providers.
You mentioned this could be good for Apple. Say more. Obviously, they've felt a couple clicks behind. In earnings last week, Tim Cook went out of his way to say, nope, we're in this race. We're going to stay aggressive. They have a partnership with OpenAI. Is OpenAI one of those sources behind Siri? How is this good for Apple, and how should Apple play this moment?
Yeah, well, let's first take a step back and say that Apple is just clearly behind on this one, right? And you can see it in their products. We're all using ChatGPT and talking to it and having profound conversations, and we go to Siri and it can barely call my mother. So obviously, we're not playing at the same level. Now, if you take a step back, the biggest risk to Apple says, well, we're not seeing it in our revenue, right? We're still selling phones. Apple's Apple's franchise is the iPhone franchise. And what keeps you using the iPhone? Well, at the end of the day, it's the apps on the phone. And that moat of a
The
few
camera.
million
For
apps.
anyway, yeah.
Sorry?
I think it's the camera. But yes, no, it's
It's
the
the
apps
camera.
too.
Okay.
Yes.
But the camera is easy for others to replicate, whereas the apps are very hard for others to replicate. Or a better way to say it is they used to be hard. Right now, thanks to AI being able to write any app in a few minutes, thanks to this model context protocol, this MCP technology that everyone's standardizing upon,
Yep.
we're getting towards a world. We're not there yet, but we're getting towards a world where you could launch a phone tomorrow that can kind of do anything any of the apps can do, even though those million app providers never built the apps for your phone.
Are
So
we really, though? I mean, you and I have been in this Silicon Valley world since about 10 different things were going to kill the app ecosystem. I mean, yes, it seems like we're facing the biggest threat yet, but what are you seeing? You invest in a number of startups, right? What are you seeing that makes you think that MCP and agents are the ultimate threat to apps?
yeah, it's almost what you're not seeing. You're seeing almost every founder sit there and shiver in their boots that the next ChatGPT model is just going to do what their entire company and app has done. You're seeing VCs say, "Uh-oh, I don't want to invest into the app layer because all of this is going to get eaten alive." And then you see engineers, whether it's myself or others, that are coding, and we're sitting there with Claude Code, and Claude Code can use MCP to hit almost any service. It can hit Slack, but it doesn't have its own Slack. It can hit iMessage, but it doesn't have its own iMessage app. And so what you're realizing is that the capabilities of these models are not only growing organically from the training inside of them, but their ability to use tools is not only expanding linearly, it's expanding exponentially.
But
So yes,
doesn't their
I think one
ability to
weird
use the tool, isn't that predicated on a tool being made available to them, right? If we're in this agent to agent war, and we've had so many great conversations on TITV about this, like, you need that other service to say, yeah, talk to my agent. Right now in e-commerce, Amazon, Shopify, they're saying, no, don't talk to us.
You used to need it. This is the challenge. When an AI can use a computer the way you use a computer, how can they stop you?
Oh
It
my
doesn't
goodness.
exist
Okay.
anymore. The AI can just click the buttons on the screen. It can write any code. So at some point you realize that like if you're not going to block this from a legal perspective, which is very hard to do, the AI seems to be able to kind of take over and act as the user. And so now we're living in a world where the moat of all these millions of apps may not be as strong as it was before. So if that moat of the apps leaves, what is the moat on the iPhone? Well, it's FaceTime and iMessage at the end of the day. It's the fact that your community of communication,
Social networks, man. How
social network.
ironic.
And it's interesting you put it that way because who is the person best suited to attack that? Well, if it's just social networks, if I just need your social graph and the ability to communicate, it's Zuck, right? It's Facebook, it's Meta. Meta has WhatsApp, they have Instagram. And let's be real, we know the history here. If there's anybody who's not happy that the Apple platform, that he's beholden to the Apple platform, it's Zuck. And so in between OpenAI going after phones and devices and Zuck's ability to kind of, or I should say his vengeance of going after Apple, I do think they're incredibly under threat here for the iPhone franchise.
Mhm.
But I think if we can get really good on-device models, and in this case, they can use OpenAIs without having to give up much to OpenAI. They can just take the model, they can train it to use the apps on the phone, and frankly, you can get a really good version of Siri fairly quickly right then and there. And I think that's their best opportunity.
Mhm. Great take. I like it. I hadn't thought of it, and I think it is important. We have to wrap soon, but I just also got to ask you about Google, your alma mater. You were a part of creating Alphabet with Larry. So your Google. I mean, we could take this in a lot of directions, but I guess building off the model horse race, right? How important is it for Gemini to be, that next iteration, sort of take on every one of these use cases versus just milking the distribution for all that you've got? I mean, every day I have some complaint that Gemini doesn't have my Gmail, doesn't have this or that. Maybe the answer is you focus on both, but what's your true north if you're Sundar right now to stay ahead in this race?
Short-term focus on distribution, long-term focus on research. The reality is that DeepMind's research team right now is second to none, and it's not even close, right? If you look at things like the Genie 3 model that they released yesterday, or Alpha Evolve or Alpha, like they are leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else right now in their ability to research and push the frontier models. In fact, they're pushing frontier models in areas of physics and science that others are barely even trying at this point. Now, the reality is that revenue is going to come from distribution in the short term. All of those
It's also not clear DeepSeek wants revenue. I mean, so I think you can be right, but there's just this entire question around what this research lab and its owners want it to become, right? That's an important piece of it.
Yeah, and this is where the fact that Google has probably about 6,000 researchers is just going to trump DeepSeek, because there's so many areas of research here that you just need to be able to block and tackle them. There's the entire AI for science. Can AI be the scientist and kind of truly push the frontier forward? Where really outside of Google, nobody's making a huge dent in that. Yet at Google, you're sitting here and we don't truly internalize the assets that they're sitting on top of. So as an example, they released this kind of video game model Genie 3 yesterday, where you can walk through any universe and it's generated live. And we look at that and we say, oh, this will be great for games. But take a step back and think about what that means that model inherently has. That model has imbued a concept of physics that is far more advanced than any physics textbook that we have today. Whether it's water splashing, whether it's light rays bouncing off walls, they understand physics at a deeper level than modern physics does. And when you realize that you can start to back that out of the model, you quickly realize that the limits of this are not games. It could be material science. It could be all of engineering. It could be energy. And that's where Google is going to lead in the coming years and decades.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Distribution, research. I think they can do both. That's just my opinion. I think, but well, Adrian, you go test all the models out and then report back, and we'll have you back here soon. Thanks for joining us. And back to you, Akash.
That was Jessica Lessin with Adrian Aoun. AI coding startups have been all the rage lately, and they have been getting wildly successful at raising gobs and gobs of money. But my colleague, Anita Ramaswamy, who is our financial analysis columnist, wrote a piece this morning looking at the valuation multiples for some of these businesses and also some of the challenges that they face. And I want to bring on Anita to talk all about it. Anita, welcome back to TITV. It's great to have you here.
Hey, Akash.
So talk to me about what prompted you to write this column.
Yeah, so I live in San Francisco, and it seems like I can't escape people talking about vibe coding and coding agents. I was at the laundromat the other day, and I heard people having a discussion about whether they use Cursor or Windsurf. So I thought it was a pretty hot space and thought it would be a good time to take a look at what the valuations are looking like around the sector.
And walk us through some of the analysis you did for the story.
So my big takeaway here, Akash, is that vibe coding is overhyped. These assistants are really popular. They're growing super fast. They're gaining a lot of users and revenue. But at the end of the day, if you come back to fundamentals, I look at the public markets a lot. And I took a look at a company, GitLab, which is in a lot of similar spaces. Yes, they're growing a little slower, right? They're growing at maybe 30%. It's still really impressive for a software company, but their multiple is around 6.3 times in the public markets right now on forward revenue. If you look at where some of these coding startups have previously raised in the last couple of months, the valuations have been a lot higher, more in the 20 to 30 times range of their annualized revenue. So just kind of looking at the risks that these companies face in terms of competition, in terms of their business models being relatively unproven, and the idea that they may or may not ever reach profitability, my analysis kind of showed that those valuations might be a little overdone.
And talk to me about which companies in particular you focused your analysis on for those private startups and their valuations.
Yeah, so I took a look at a number of private startups, and all of them have sort of raised at different times, and we have different data across them. But some of the big names are Cursor. I looked a little bit at Windsurf in terms of their acquisition multiple. They obviously got bought by Google or sort of acqui-hired by Cognition as well. I looked at Cognition as a standalone company. I looked at StackBlitz, which is the company that makes a popular tool called Bolt, and another similar tool called Lovable.
And the one of the difficulties with this type of analysis is that a lot of these companies, some make their revenue figures public, some come out and say it, some we report on their revenue figures, but
Yeah.
it's sort of tough to sometimes put multiples on some of these companies. The other half of your story was you talked a little bit about some of the challenges that these AI coding startups will face. One of the things you mentioned was churn. How big of an issue do you think that will be?
So we don't know just yet how bad it is, but all of these tools are still in the experimentation phase. I think that churn is a real possibility for two reasons. I mean, firstly, these tools right now are not yet replacing junior engineers, and I'm not sure that they ever will. In the sense that there still needs to be for a lot of these companies, and what I've been hearing from public company CEOs and private company CEOs is that there still needs to be a human in the loop on some of this. So just because a coding tool might write 30% more code doesn't mean that it's going to become 30% more efficient or make the company more efficient. So there's a little bit less stickiness than you might expect. The other issue with churn is particular to some of the startups that are more like real vibe coding startups and that they cater to non-technical users. And so for those sorts of tools like a Lovable or a Bolt, they're used oftentimes by people like even myself who want to experiment, play around, maybe build an app here or there, but it's ultimately not an essential part of those people's job functions. So when these companies mature a little bit, I think inevitably they're going to start focusing a little bit more on enterprise sales and selling to bigger companies. And when that happens, it's going to be really hard for the Lovables and Bolts of the world to compete because their target audience at the end of the day is not software engineers.
And talk about competition. I mean, how are these companies all pitching themselves against each other in terms of having a moat or any kind of defensibility here?
It's funny because, we just had Adrian on talking about something similar about how Anthropic and OpenAI are threatening the app layer in AI. And I think it's a similar story here where you have both Anthropic and OpenAI and some of the other foundation model makers that all have their own coding assistants that are directly in competition with the Cursors and the Windsurfs and the Lovables of the world. And so each of them, the startups, is sort of differentiating themselves a little bit based on the user experience, based on word of mouth, the sort of viral marketing. I guess people chatting about your coding tool at the laundromat's a good thing. But my feeling is that at the end of the day, there is very little differentiation in this space, given that all of these players ultimately are building off of largely Anthropic and to some extent OpenAI's models.
Last question for you before we let you go. What are you watching for from here?
I am watching for some potential M&A. I think it's very possible that we see that in this space. We've obviously seen a lot of funding rounds that have already closed in the last couple of months. But my feeling is that because there are so many different startups tackling different parts of the coding stack, like Cognition and Poolside that are building their own models, Cursor, Windsurf that are actually building more of that layer on top, I think we're going to start to see some consolidation. And I'm going to be excited to write about some acquisitions, hopefully.
Great. Well, I'll tell you what, Anita, next time you go to the laundromat and you hear something juicy, come right back on the show the next morning and tell us all about what you're hearing, because clearly the laundromat is where Silicon Valley is most chatty these days. Thank you so much for coming on and talking AI vibe coding with us. That is Anita Ramaswamy, our financial analysis columnist. Well, that does it for today's show. A reminder, we are on this stream Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank Amazon Web Services, who was our presenting sponsor for this production. And I want to thank you for tuning in. We really do appreciate your viewership. I am already excited for our next show tomorrow. And so until then, I will see you tomorrow, Silicon Valley.